If you've watched any of the videos on this channel, you will not be shocked to hear that I like collecting physical media, but I would never really qualify myself as a completist in any way, shape, or form. Yes, I know that may be shocking when you look at all the stuff that surrounds me, but I was never someone that had that much money, so the idea of completing collections just to have them was something that never really was necessary for me. I am not someone that usually wants all the Criterion titles or all the Vinegar Syndrome titles, but I do collect everything that is released on the MVD Rewind label. MVD Entertainment is like a big umbrella that does all sorts of stuff. And MVD Rewind is a label under that umbrella produced by Eric D. Wilkinson. And as far as I can tell, most of the titles are taken from films that were released by Imperial Entertainment, like Nemesis, for example, the Albert Pyun film. And what MVD Rewind does is they take these pictures and they treat them like they are the greatest thing ever made. I mean, somehow, before they put out Nemesis on Blu-ray, it had never been released in high definition in North America. It didn't even have a special edition on DVD. And with their Blu-ray, they put together the ultimate edition. 2 discs, it has different cuts of the film, it has an introduction by Albert Pyun, introduction by Olivier Grunner. It kind of put together a bunch of stuff that was released before, like in Germany and around the world, and just got all the content possible on this particular film. They even put out Nemesis 2, 3, 4 in a special edition after this one, and it also had special features, which is wild because nobody likes those movies, even though some of them are actually really interesting. So early on, MVD, they released titles like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes on Blu-ray, and I didn't pick that one up because I knew it, I had a special edition DVD, it wasn't something that I needed to add to my collection. But as they kept going, they started to pick titles that I had never heard of. And while not all of the movies are great, some of them I probably wouldn't even recommend to go check out on their own, the reason that I love this label so much is that every release is packed with as many special features as you would ever want. So as far as I could tell, most of them are directed by Richard Schenkeman, a director who, if you look at his letterbox, his most popular picture is Abe Lincoln versus Zombies, but he's been directing things since the 90s, and he goes in depth. Almost all of the releases that MVD has put out have full-length feature making-ofs that are exclusive to these releases. So for example, something like Double Impact, there's not only the making of Double Impact, which includes interviews with Jean-Claude Van Damme, there's also extended scenes, an anatomy of a scene with the director, the original archival behind-the-scenes featurette, B-roll. Like, this is a package that the people who made this did not have to put together, but they went to the furthest lengths to make sure that it is the ultimate version of this movie. Now, while you have obvious stuff like Split Second, the Rutger Hauer film that was a video favorite, or Double Dragon, which is a movie that I don't know if people love. I have an affinity for because it's so goofy, and I especially love that it had a 90-minute making of that included interviews with Mark Dacascos and Scott Wolf, the 2 stars of the picture. See, the reason that I check out all the MVD Rewind releases is that it gives the films a context that they should never have had. And by that I mean that no one would have cared as much as the people putting together these packages. You get the stories of what went behind it, the hopes, the dreams, of sometimes films that fell right between the cracks. I mean, for example, Boogie Boy kind of gets lumped in with the Pulp Fiction knockoffs that were coming out in the 90s. And one of the reasons is that it was written and directed by Craig R. Hammond, and he was one of the guys that worked in the same video store as Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery. But this film, while not great, is interesting, and what really gives it value when you buy this disc is the 90-minute documentary that comes with it. Interviews with Mark Dacascos, John Hawkes, James Liu, the producer, and the writer-director, just giving their thoughts, their feelings of what came before, what came during shooting, and what came after. The people who get interviewed on these docs, it really gives them a chance to kind of look back on something that they never thought anybody would talk about, and there's real value in that. But also just giving an entirely different story of these creative people that at one time long ago came together to make these pictures. Now, there's a lot of MVD titles, and like I said, I grab every new one that comes out hoping to find a new discovery. There are some that I would actually recommend people to check out, especially the ones that are titles that nobody talks about. For example, Boogie Boy, which I just mentioned. There is stuff like Mikey, which was a killer kid film that came in that kind of like wave of killer kid films in the 90s. And while not a Again, great. It is interesting, and the 90-minute documentary, which has the star, the director, and the producer, is fascinating because this was the first film that the director made, and he gets to go through what his process was. You get to hear from his cinematographer. You get to see the whole behind-the-scenes story of what went into a film that, let's be honest, most people have forgotten. It came out at the video store. Maybe people have nostalgia for it because they rented it there, but it's not one that gets talked about as a cult classic. It's not one that gets re-released over and over again on DVD and Blu-ray. And that's why MVD Rewind is such a valuable label, because they are willing to put the time and the energy into giving the ultimate packages. Like, for example, a film, My Samurai. I'd never heard of it before. It's one of those, like, kid teams up with some martial arts master. The actors in it, none of them went on to do anything else. The film is so interesting. It has fun martial arts sequences. It has its very own energy. There's two versions of it on this disc. There's the high definition version, which kind of has some off sound, and it also has a VHS transfer in case you wanted that kind of video feel, and the VHS version actually has better sound than the high definition transfer. And of course, there's documentaries, there's all sorts of stuff, and it's why I love like a film like Showdown, which is a kind of Karate Kid ripoff, but it stars an actual martial artist who was one of the stunt performers in the Ninja Turtle costumes in the live action New Line films, and Billy Blanks, who was super charming in the film. Everyone that was involved with the picture gets interviewed on this disc. The director, Robert Radler, the writer, Stuart Gibbs, and even the stars, Ken Scott, Billy Blanks, John Asher, Patrick Kilpatrick, they're all on here. The thing with special features is often you don't get that many voices, because oftentimes it'll be bigger films, they've gone on to other things, and not to be too negative, but a lot of the people who get interviewed for these MVD discs, they want to go back and talk about their experiences because time has passed and they are allowed to reflect on it and look back and talk about the good and the bad. That's what these special features bring to the viewer. An entire history of everyone that was involved. And it just flabbergasts me that this exists, because I would assume that most people wouldn't take the time to make these kind of special features, because the films themselves that they're talking about don't have that big of a following. So that's why I check out every MVD Rewind release, because it allows me not only to discover some interesting pictures, but also get the context and hear the stories of the people that made it. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel. I keep posting videos as often as I can, and every time I see a new person subscribe, I'm like, yes, I should go and make some more videos. Also, if you want to hear me talk about movies or physical media, I do a podcast called the Bay Street Video Podcast, where me and Mark Hansen, the product manager of one of the only remaining brick and mortar video stores in North America, talk about all the new Blu-rays and DVDs that are released every month. I also talk about obscure films and big films on the Important Cinema Club podcast, which I do every week with Will Sloan. Both those podcasts can be very easily found by going to filmtrap.com or by searching their titles in Google. Will be the first thing that pops up. Again, thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to this channel. It would be very much appreciated.